Hello, welcome everyone. I don't know who's going to be joining us this evening, but as you will see in the description of today's live event, we have guest expert Ismail Sadin from Avli Healthcare Marketing. Some of you who have been around in the group for a while will remember a while back we had Khalid, who is also from Avli Marketing, and he spoke about the 3 simple ways that you can market your private practice. And so today we're lucky enough to have them borrow one of the other brains, which is Ismail, and he's going to be talking about something which I feel is very important and often overlooked. It's something I've spoken about before. So I'm really excited to have him here and talk about it, because they are actually launching a course for staff in healthcare practices around this topic. So what is the topic that we're going to be talking about, and why is it so important? Well, you can have the best marketing, you can have the most people visiting your website, you can have so many people contacting you about your services, but at the end of the day, that last step before they make an appointment, if that's not good enough, you're not going to end up getting appointments. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to bring on our guest onto the screen. Ismail, welcome, and thank you so much for taking time out of your personal time to join us this evening.
Hi, I'm Ismail, and I'm ready to roll. Okay, you can just let me know when the screen is shared, and then I can start with the presentation.
Okay, the screen is now shared.
Hi, I'm Ismail Sadin. I'm Head of Operations and Practice Growth Consultant at Avli. What do we do at Avli? At Avli, we grow healthcare organizations. The growth is primarily focused on growing a patient base. So it's not necessarily growing profitability, be in the form of efficiencies or productivity. It's exclusively growing the patient base. How do we do this? We do this through an offering that consists of 4 services. 4 services being practice branding. Practice branding simply is the name of a practice, identity, which could be the form of colors and logo. We do marketing, and marketing is exclusively digital marketing. We don't do marketing on any other platform or medium, being print, radio, TV. It's only on the digital channels. We do staff training. Staff training is focused on the staff members in a practice that have touches with the patients, but will exclude the practitioner. And lastly, we do practitioner referral building. Practitioner referral building is marketing healthcare services to other practitioners who could refer into your practice. So the direct marketing is to patients, practitioner referral is to other practitioners. Today, we will focus on our offering, which is staff training. And we may ask the question, why staff training? What makes staff training so important? Now, we have done a fair amount of research, as well as other entities have done researches and published papers. And this research has shown that practices owe their success to a number of characteristics. And one that flows through a number of these studies are labeled by things like patient-centric, patient satisfaction, or properly trained staff. So what underpins all of these things? It is staff training, because you're not going to achieve these things through some accident or by default. It takes a deliberate action from the practice to say, we will train our staff to achieve these things. When we go into practices, we typically recommend that they start with training their front desk staff. Why the front desk staff? It is the patient's first touch point into the practice. And it's important that that touch is a pleasant experience and one that will make patients come back. So a frontline staff training program, if you can call it that, consists of 6 modules. 6 modules are, firstly, direct communication. Direct communication is that face-to-face communication that happens in the practice and primarily at the reception desk. We teach the basics, but beyond the basics, we also try and instill the value of that communication with the delegate, because ultimately that is what adds value to the practice. It's what makes patients come back, and it has to be a good experience. It's not only about the communication that's had, but it's also about the atmosphere that is created within the practice, and especially in the reception area or the front desk area. Next, we talk about telephonic communication. Practices receive a high number of inbound calls. It's important that those inbound calls are treated or dealt with in a professional manner. Greetings have to be consistent. People have to introduce themselves. These might sound like obvious things, but we do find places where this do not happen, or those things do not happen consistently. Also, very often telephonic communication sort of produce opportunities along the conversation for services of the practice to be offered to the caller. And it's important that those little nuggets of potential services offerings can be not exploited. Exploit is the wrong word, but we need to take them up and offer that service to the inbound caller. Email correspondence. Here we teach the basic etiquette of email. We also equip them to go away to put in place the necessary processes to manage email correspondence. Email correspondence is a tough one in that it's not a direct or real-time conversation. It's an asynchronous conversation. So somebody would send an email and they have no expectation as to when they could possibly get a response. We teach them mechanisms to put in place to manage that expectation from the sender of that email. We also point out to them the typical mistakes that are made in email conversations. And here I very often touch on a very simple thing, but we very often get this wrong. Tone of email needs to, of outgoing emails or responses must match that of the sender of the email. In simple terms, if somebody addresses the practice using hi, and you respond with dear sir, you're pushing that potential patient away because you have not been open to their casual address. Social media. We all know that practices more and more create presences on these platforms. This is a place where they post messages. There has to be frameworks in place to make sure that those are consistent. It also opens the practice up to receive inquiries or questions via this platform, and all of those have to be attended to. Not being attended to will leave a mark on the image of that practice or the brand that that practice is trying to project. Dealing with difficult people. I think we all wish that this will never happen, but in reality, it does happen. What we aim to do here is to equip the front desk individual with the necessary tools to firstly remain calm and possibly turn that experience for that patient into a good one, and ultimately have a happy patient and a patient returning to a practice. The last one, and it's probably the most important one, converting calls or touch points into appointments. What we have to realize, or the mindset that we have to have, is that any individual that makes contact with a healthcare practice has a healthcare need, whether it's for themselves or for somebody else. And we almost have the responsibility to make sure that that need is met when they make the call. So therefore, yeah, just about any touch point into a call from a potential patient or on behalf of a potential patient has to end up in an appointment booking for that individual. That's us in a nutshell. Questions?
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, so I'm going to ask that we've got quite a few people live. So if anyone has any questions, please just post it in the comments. So I have a few questions. You mentioned that, you know, some of the things that you go through in your course is identifying some of the common mistakes that and how to avoid some of the pitfalls or mistakes that front of staff tend to make. Can you give us some examples from your experience that you have seen of mistakes front staff tend to make?
Okay, so the one that I mentioned, which is a very common one, especially in email conversations, is that very often practices create standard responses to emails that they receive. In those standard responses, there's also as to how they address the sender of that email. What we have seen very often, because we have looked at communication trails in practices when we try and understand a contact has been made with a practice, but ultimately that contact has not turned into an appointment booking, or there is no response after the first response from the practice. A very common one where there's been drop-off in those communications is when people address the practice formally, the response might be an informal one or vice versa. It's probably the most common, if I can call it, mistake that we've seen. And our theory there is that when people speak to you in a particular tone and you don't honor that tone, you sort of push them away, or they could consider it disrespectful. So when somebody addresses the practice formally with a dear sir or dear madam, and you respond saying hi, yeah, they might consider that to be not respectful. The other one, when they say hi and you respond with a dear sir, they sort of being casual and you sort of creating distance between yourself and that patient. And they invariably do not continue that conversation. Okay.
And then when it comes to telephonic mistakes that happen on the phone, people, what have you seen some of the mistakes when somebody's phoning for an appointment but end up not making it because of the person?
Yeah. Very often, and counselors / psychologists probably are the worst at doing this. When somebody calls, they do have a problem, and they're going to try and get as much information out of you without booking an appointment. The reason why somebody calls a medical practice is they need help. They're not going to get that help in a 5-minute conversation. But the more information you feed them, the more likely they are to believe that the problem has been solved, and they actually don't take the next step to actually make an appointment to see a practitioner. I've had numerous conversations and lectures with especially psychologists, because we do campaigns for them. We send many referrals their way. They have these calls, and when you interrogate them about the calls and why they haven't turned into appointments, some of those have ended up having 2 and 3 conversations on the telephone, lasting anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. I'm like, you're not going to get the person to come and see you. And it's almost not the right thing to do, because it's not the best way to serve them.
That's very interesting. And you know what? I think that that's probably rings true as well for anyone in the pediatric field. So, like pediatric OTs probably experience the same thing because parents will tend to ask advice about their child on
Yeah.
the phone, and then you give the answer, and then they feel, okay, well, I don't need to come and see
People
you
take
now.
the smallest bit of information and believe that they've been helped, and the
Yeah.
problem is a lot bigger. And if I can give, especially practitioners that deal directly with patients who do not have front desk staff, it's the one thing that they absolutely have to stay away from. You listen to it and you have to offer them an appointment. No other advice, no other direction. Please come and see me. Let us have a proper consultation so that I can guide you.
Yeah.
Giving the small bit of information, you're actually just misleading them.
And I think also, I mean, I think the reason why health professionals make that mistake is because they inherently are helpers and they're trying to help. But you also have to be cognizant of the fact that actually you don't want to be even subtly so treading into offering medical advice territory, because that is actually unethical as well.
Yeah.
So you want to always, and I think, what would you say would be a good tip for someone to, because some people will get kind of flustered, somebody's phoning, and then they go into default mode of giving help. Do you think it would help to kind of have just a basic kind of a script you memorize, even though you don't say the exact thing, but just so that you kind of have an idea of should respond to questions? Or
Yeah, you have to say that I cannot solve your problem in a short conversation. I really do recommend that you make an appointment. I have time available for you in these slots.
okay.
Some people might find that abrupt, but I guess it's probably the best thing that you can do, because one question with an answer will lead to another question. And very quickly you're down a 5-10 minute conversation giving half advice. I know it's
Yeah,
tough. I'm not a medical practitioner. I don't find myself in that position. But I do often hear that people ask a question or two, they get an answer, and they never come back to make the appointment for a proper consultation. It is necessary. So, yeah, I always just say, please try and keep conversations to a bare minimum. Understand the primary reason for the call into your practice is to make an appointment. Unless it's a teleconsult, that's different. But when somebody calls and the reason for that call is not a teleconsult, the only reason for that call is to make an appointment.
Yeah. So we have a question from Frances, who is an audiologist. She wants to know, are online bookings effective?
Online bookings for some practitioners in some parts of the country do work. So, for example, online bookings in the mental health industry works well there. I know of a number of practices that only do online bookings. They literally have a link on their site which you have to click and you have to make the booking. The practice does not take any phone calls. We also have clients, very few of them, with dental practices that only do online bookings. It's also a common practice for general practitioners. A lot of them use online bookings as well as physiotherapists. So where your treatments and your time slots are well defined, it's easily done, and there is an uptake for those kind of things. Understand the uptake for those kind of appointments are within a certain age group, if I can call it that, and within certain cities within the country. So, for example, we don't see a huge number of uptake for online bookings, for example, in KZN. But in, for example, Sandton, there is a huge uptake of online bookings, but again, not in Pretoria. So it varies from city to city through the country, and also from the kind of practice that you run. But generally, healthcare practitioners has probably got the highest uptake of online bookings.
That's so fascinating. It's interesting to see that different. And this is, I
Yeah,
guess, why I say to people all the time, you have to know your target audience, right? Because if you're just kind of doing a blanket marketing type thing for everyone and your target audience doesn't suit them, then pointless.
yeah. Not everything works the same across the different cities in South Africa. Different demographics. I don't know. There are many factors that drive the different behavior in different parts of the country.
Yeah. Do you think that in the sort of disciplines where it's there's a high percentage client side because maybe they know, like let's say for example, somebody with a child who they know they need to see the practitioner for multiple times in order to see results. It's not like I'm going to go for a treatment and then I'm going to be better. So the perception of risk is higher in choosing the correct person because they know they're going to invest time and money into this person on a more longer term. Do you think that offering some sort of initial consultation increases the conversion compared to just kind of saying come in for an assessment? Or from your experience, have you seen that that's made a difference?
So when you look at longer term treatment plans, right, and whether it is in the form of rehabilitation or whether it is mental health or counseling or those kind of things, what some practitioners do is they offer a 5 or 10 minute, call it free consultation, right?
Okay.
Rehabilitation centers, I think, refer to it as an initial assessment, and very often they do that for free. And that is really just to build a relationship with the patient, and ultimately those probably do turn into the longer term treatment plans.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I see a few more people have joined on. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I also wanted to ask that, you already covered my question around if you as the practitioner, when you're just starting out, if you are your front staff, so you've already addressed that. But I also wanted to ask, so in general, like just to end off now, if nobody has any further questions, this would be the last one. In general, if you do have reception staff, what would be kind of the one most important thing that you need to when onboarding or hiring staff, or what would be the one most important thing that you want to kind of look out for and make sure that your front of staff are aware of when it comes to converting those touch points into clients' bookings?
I mean, it's probably true in most industries, or as it's true for any staff that you appoint. And very often one would say appoint for the intellect and the behavioral characteristics, and you can train the rest of the stuff. So when you look at reception staff, they have to be courteous and they have to be respectful, because I think all patients and everybody needs to be treated with respect. And if people display that characteristic, they have the core ingredient to make a good reception person, because the rest of the stuff you can train. But if they're not respectful people, you're not going to win that. You're not going to get them to be the ideal or the reception person that you'd want them to be. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, from my personal experience as a consumer now, not as a health professional, I've had experiences where I've called up a doctor and the reception staff when the reception staff kind of tries everything, you can tell that they're trying everything in their power to help you get an appointment that is suitable to you. Then you tend to always phone that practice, and compared to somebody who like kind of just, we don't have an appointment, has that attitude and not being proactive.
Yeah. No, but it's an important thing that you touch on, and maybe I didn't mention it when I covered off what the training entails. A big part of when we do the training is we connect it to the value that they add to the practice, right? The front desk person is probably like one of the most key individuals in a practice that creates a success in that practice, because an unfriendly front desk person can turn half your patients away before you even know that patient exists, because they call into the practice, they have an unpleasant experience because the reception person who answered the phone was just not very friendly, and the conversation doesn't even go anywhere. People will literally cut that conversation short and call up the next practice. So reception staff is what makes the practice. It's where the practice starts. Without that, you have no hope in hell. Sorry to use the word, but
And of course, if you are your front staff, then you are that person. So
you better know that you have to be nice to people. They're not going to come back to you. People, the world that existed 20, 30 years ago, where practitioners believe that patients would come to them regardless of how they're being treated, is gone. There are mechanisms that have opened up choice for patients. They don't have to go to the one doctor that exists or who they've been referred to. People have freedom of choice. So they walk into one practice and it's not the experience they're after, they're not going to come back. They're going to go to the next one. So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I want to just end off by you maybe just talking a little bit more about the logistics of this course that you guys have now launched. Where can they reach you? When does it start? How do you deliver it? All that good stuff.
Okay. You can visit our website, avely.co.za. In the next week or two, we'll actually launch the training program, and we will possibly reach most medical practitioners around the country. So we will be putting it, we will actively be advertising it.
Just pin this comment. So, and how will it be delivered online, or how will the course be delivered?
Online video course. And
so then
every session will accommodate up to 10 delegates.
Okay. So it's a live course where they can ask questions.
It's a live course. We will typically try and sort of group people of like practices, if you want, together. Because there are certain things that become a little bit practice specific or healthcare type specific.
And what is the cost involved, or are they able to find the costs on the website?
The cost will be on the website. It is 1,200 Rand per delegate.
And it's for how long is it, did you say?
The course is a 3-hour, and there will be a follow-up with each individual.
Okay.
So while the course will be offered in a group, the follow-ups will be one-on-one.
Okay, understood. Okay, great. Thank you so much. If nobody else has any question, I'm going to let you go. Really appreciate your time once again. And as always, for those of you in the Facebook group watching live, as you know, I leave it to replay in the group for a while. But I do eventually take it down, edit it, and stick it up onto YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it anytime. And all the details will, of course, be put in the description box below the YouTube video. So thank you very much, Ishmael, and have a good evening further.
Thank you.